Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Room, the podcast brought to you by LFC Transfer Room. We are welcomed today by myself, Matty, and Daz, my co-hosts. YouTube sensation, Matty, how are you? You okay?
Not bad. Looking forward to getting in the ground next week. But yeah, not bad. How are you?
I'm getting there, yeah. I'm not as fortunate to get tickets on the regular, so my membership is in the ballot, so we'll see how many I can get. I'm podcast extraordinaire Daz. How are you?
I'm good, very good. A bit jealous of Matty as well. I have to take a 9-hour flight.
Yeah, that's true. That is very true. I know that the first time that we play at Anfield this season and the first time that we hear "You'll Never Walk Alone" it's just going to be so inspirational, and we just cannot believe how long it's been since we've heard that. So I can't wait for it. And today we are also joined by a very special guest, Jerry Mancini, who writes for Laziali and Italian Football News. How are you, Jerry?
Fantastic. Thank you for asking. I'm very happy to join you guys.
Excellent. And then just a bit of background then, really, Jerry. So you're a Lazio fan, and obviously there's, people will put 2 and 2 together and get 4, hopefully, as into why. Obviously, you're on this week's podcast with certain transfers that we'll discuss. But Daz is going to kick us off with the questions. So I'm going to pass over to you, Daz.
Well, my first question, Jerry. Thank you for coming on the podcast. But I always like to ask journalists, like, how did you get into becoming a journo?
So it's actually funny because for the longest time I wasn't watching football. I've always been a Lazio fan since the 90s, but because to get broadcasting here was always difficult. For a long time, I didn't have access to watching games, and a lot of times I would just check my phones for like updates or online. And I would say going to London really changed me when I went for my honeymoon back in 2018-19, where I kind of got that love for it, where I was at watching the game Southampton versus Chelsea, and what really inspired me was the fans and how passionate they are and how much they love the game. And it's much different compared to North American sports, where over here it's a lot of business, where you do have the fans, but at the same time there's those ticket holders who just don't care, and it's just the money and the investments and the business people. So just the people itself, the tradition, how the Chelsea fans are in one section when they cheer alone, like away, and then you have the home crowd who are on the other side, and it was really a different experience. And basically that kind of grew my love back in. I started watching games more regularly. I found out what DAZN was able to find like the app, and then one day along the road I saw the Laziali, and they were asking for writers. So basically I just shot a message, and they were kind to respond. And never having any experience with writing of like articles, news, anything, I just took a chance. And from there I just went one after another. And after the Laziali, I went to get on Football News. I've done some work for Vavel. I think they're pretty well known in England. And I just went from different sites, and from there it just gave me a new passion for the sport, because it's fun to actually write and podcast for football compared to other sports. I kind of find where there's more to engage about, more to talk about, more topics, and it's more wide related. So for me, that's how it became. It was very fortunate. I guess I was lucky to see the tweet on Twitter where they were asking for writers, and in small world was the guy who runs the Laziali is actually 10 minutes away from my house, so which was another small thing. But overall, it's been a great experience. I'm always learning. It's allowed me to understand the game more, always reading books about what football is, like the positions. I don't like to be that kind of person on Twitter where I think I know everything when I don't, and it's better to learn and to be more educated and give a better response.
Nice one. Do you want me to ask the second part, or? Yeah. All right, might as well. Is this like your favourite time of year? Is the transfer window?
I hate it.
Yeah,
I hate it. It's I think 2 seasons ago, I was so into it, and now my friend, who's a big Napoli fan, always tells me, he's like, don't get too invested into it because the news changes so quick that today you'll be linked to Messi, tomorrow you're linked to Neymar, the next day you're linked to somebody else. It's so sporadic and so inconsistent that like 90% of the rumors never actually happen. So I prefer the actual football itself once it starts. That's where the excitement is for me.
Yeah, it drives me nuts, actually. You know, I wish the transfer window could be over in like a week. It just kind of drags on, especially last season. But I'm actually glad about last season. It did drag on because we got Thiago and Jota.
It might have to drag on this season as well because we seem to be dragging our heels a little bit. In terms of transfers, I think we probably share, you know, what you're saying as well about the window. It's just an absolute nightmare. It seems just a nightmare of epic proportions where even if we were saying on our spaces, we do Twitter spaces most Saturday nights as well, and we was taking callers in. It's really intriguing. Yesterday's, we were filming this on the Sunday, so obviously last night was Saturday. It was actually really good, and we spoke for about 2 hours there, but it's still like nobody in Liverpool Football Club is really in the know, if I'm completely honest, because, you know, Liverpool don't leak information. They don't want leaked to the media. So there's so many players that are being discussed. I suppose with most teams it's the same, but there's always a little hint. You know, we knew of the Sancho deal, for instance. We know of this Jack Grealish deal coming. We knew of the Varane deal. We don't have that as Liverpool fans. I think Thiago perhaps was the one in recent memory, but that seemed to be all from the Spanish side, you know, that was being reported, and there was hardly anything from Liverpool. In fact, I think the rumours from Liverpool was it was all shut down. You know, James Pearce from The Athletic was said, no, Thiago deal's not happening from Anfield, you know, sources. So, yeah, Liverpool fans share your hatred, I'm sure, of the transfer window.
Yeah, it's even with Lazio, it's the same way where they don't like to leak any information as well. They try to keep everything tight. It's similar.
It's phenomenal though when something does happen. Like we saw it with Fabinho. I think that was the first time, and I literally remember like coming home and it was like in an evening announcement, and there was on Twitter obviously there was like rumors was going to sign Fabinho out of nowhere, and then an hour later he was booked in for a medical. An hour later after that it was a done deal. So that was phenomenal. Like, and same as Jota last year. Those are the ways in which I would like to see a transfer pull out, but. You know, like you've said, you have people on Twitter who are quite, like me as well, I suppose, and all of us, a little bit impatient, and we're always refreshing the Twitter feed saying, like, who's Liverpool going to sign? You're probably the same with Lazio too. So, yeah, it's quite frustrating, the transfer window, and I really hate the fact as well, and I know why it's open, but I hate the fact that it's still open when the season begins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a really great point. It should be done before the season begins in many ways, because it becomes a distraction where your best player is linked and 99% chance he's leaving, and he's been training for the last 2 months for what? To be part of a team that he's not going to be part of? It's a good point. And it disrupts the whole tactics of how the manager is going to approach the season, and now he has to reconvene and reconsider like what's going to happen with the new player that's coming in. It's a good point what you're saying.
Looking at transfers, looking at transfers, one player who is of where he's at Liverpool still is Luis Alberto. He's been linked at leaving Lazio this summer for 60 million. Liverpool 30% sell-on clause when we sold just to Lazio means we could get a fair bit of change if he does go. Can you see him going, and how much would you just miss him? Because for Liverpool, Luis Alberto didn't cover himself in glory, where at Lazio he's the star man, isn't he?
Yeah, I don't see him leaving at all. I think that's kind of put underneath the rug unless someone has 60 million to offer, which I don't see this summer. Maybe next summer it could happen where the league starts to recover and teams start to make money again and have that financial resource to pay a player like Luis Alberto. It seems as if Maurizio Sarri has kind of won him over and is enjoying his ideas, his tactics, his thoughts, because he's looked kind of positive during preseason / training where he's giving full effort and is convinced by the game plan of Maurizio Sarri. In regards to being a better midfielder with Lazio, I credit that to Simone Inzaghi, where one of the most underrated managers, I feel, and will be one of the most talked about managers for years to come. Kind of restored the careers of players such as Luis Alberto and Ciro Immobile, and they have flourished in a 3-5-2, and it has been able to get the best out of them. I'm curious to see how he does in a 4-3-3 now. Luis Alberto, if he is able to transition to a new formation and new tactics, and Sarri has already said that he is the key guy, or one of the key guys going forward, that he needs to be fundamental and make Sarri ball kind of like proper and work. So the only thing I say with Alberto is that his attitude, where he's often in the public where he does something negative and it gives him a bad image. He needs to be less vocal and keep things inside the dressing room when something doesn't go right. Last year was like the airplane, and criticizing Lotito for purchasing a plane where he didn't even buy. Personally, I don't think he really put any money into it. This year, he's not happy. He shows up to training late. There's been previous incidents with him, so that's always his downfall. But overall, complete midfielder and I don't blame Lazio not willing to take anything less than 60 million for him, because he is worth that much. But the longer you wait and the older he gets, you're not going to get as much as you hope. That's another issue.
It's interesting because at Liverpool he was only young, but to see that he's developed an attitude after probably being a player at Liverpool who was trying to break into the team and having to show a good attitude to break into the team, to then go to a team, be the star man, and then sort of an attitude problems. It's crazy. It's proper crazy. But just how good is he for Lazio? If he was to leave Lazio, would the season be a shambles without him?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have another attacking midfielder who can replace him and be as clinical as he is. I saw a report on Friday. There was a tweet by I forgot the site. I apologize, but he had the second most created chances in the top 5 leagues, and he finished second behind Kevin De Bruyne on Man City, and that just tells you how impactful he is. And you take a player like that out of your lineup, who's creating chances, who's delivering those key passes. He's been top 3 or 4 in the last 5 seasons with Lazio in key passes. It's an unbelievable what he's able to do. He had, I believe, 9 goals this season, and a lot of people were criticizing him because he wasn't getting assists. But he's not the guy who can score as well. His distribution's unbelievable, and Immobile did miss a lot of chances at times. There are other players as well, but if people actually convert their chances of what Luis Alberto's distributing by, you see his assists go to like 10 last year. So impactful player. You take him out of the lineup, there's a big hole in that midfield. I know that Sergei Malinkovic-Savic is unbelievable, but he complements him. They contribute each other, where one is able to provide on the offensive side, where the other has been more of a box-to-box midfielder who's impactful on both ends. So,
Garbage.
Where do you just really interested just to hear really from Lazio's point of view, where do you think, or what do you think would be a success for Lazio? Because obviously you've got Juventus, the powerhouse that is Juventus. I mean, Inter Milan last season had a phenomenal season. I know that they're in financial disarray at the moment, looking to have to raise funds. They've obviously sold Hakimi. So where do Lazio fit in now in Serie A, and where do they fit into what would be a successful season?
Good question. I would say top 6. A Europa League spot would be a success. Up and beyond would be finishing 4th for Champions League, which is a possibility. It all depends how they do in the transfer market. again, going from a new manager, new personnel, new tactics, it's going to take time for Lazio to basically adjust and adapt to the new system. I expect good weeks and I expect bad weeks. The fans have to be patient. I think that's the most important, because we've been not spoiled, but we've been fortunate to have a manager who really did the most with very little in the last 5 seasons. That might not be the case this year, because Sarri he demands a lot from his players. Again, you have to consider that you need to buy wingers, which you didn't have in a 3-5-2. You need fullbacks now, which you didn't have in a 3-5-2. So there's a lot of components here where it's going to take time to flip. It's not going to be overnight, but I guess the most important thing is to see matches where you're seeing progress. You're seeing that transition where things are starting to come into light and things are getting better. But I expect highs and lows this year, and that's how it's gonna have to be probably.
Surely it's exciting though having Sarri, because he's one of them managers who will go to a club like Lazio, who isn't a powerhouse like Juventus, and do well.
No, absolutely. That is very beneficial, because we have someone who knows how to win, who's managed for big clubs, and we really haven't had that in quite a while. I would say our last manager who was really good was, his name's blank right now, is the guy who left Switzerland, who left for Bordeaux. I forgot his name. He just recently resigned with Switzerland. Petrovic. Petrovic was the last guy I can remember who was really good with Lazio and managed to win something. So, aside not being named Simone Inzaghi, so you know what, this is a big step for Lazio. It's because the investment in getting a guy like Sarri means that teams trying to maybe be more ambitious, is considering to buy players, maybe invest more, look long term, trying to win something. So it's a bright spot for a club like Lazio, who's not really known to spend a lot.
Yeah, well, I think Liverpool probably adopt a similar philosophy with Lazio, and that sell to buy. That is, apparent in both clubs really. Speaking about, obviously, I know it's not necessarily Lazio based, but obviously a writer for Italian football news. We at LFC Transfer Room had an exclusive with Sport One's Florian Plettenberg, who confirmed that Liverpool and Chelsea made a bid for Federico Chiesa. So obviously, after the Euros, he was probably sort of the most sought after winger, there was. And obviously this is a complicated deal, because whilst he's loaned out from Fiorentina with an obligation to buy at Juventus finished in the top 4. So therefore they are, that clause has been met, that he will be a Juventus player should he accept their contract, etc. So Florian Plettenberg basically told us that Liverpool made a bid for Chiesa. Chiesa wasn't interested. He wants to, pave his future at Juventus, which is absolutely fine, as most Italian players do. What are your views on Chiesa, and do you think there's anyone in Serie A that Liverpool should be looking at, in that forward, anywhere across the front 3 position?
Oh, that's a good question. I didn't prepare. When it comes to who's good, I never actually, even my own team, I never really have an idea. But in terms of Chiesa, I guess he's comfortable with Juventus playing, I guess, regardless the best team in Serie A, you have to say. And it's a big transition from Fiorentina to Juventus, which really helped him, because I always said that playing in Fiorentina is always going to bury good players. Dusan Vlahovic is another one where I don't see him staying long term. There's just no foundation, no consistency, no game plan where they know what the future is like, and they've just ruined so many players. And Chiesa was one of those who I thought that just was used under so many different managers, because they never kept a consistent manager. You got different tactics every year, different ideas every year, and it just ruins a player because they just don't know what's going on. You can't have a player think 5 different ways in 3 seasons. It's just not healthy for them. So the transition to Juventus, playing for a bigger club, maybe had kind of raised his game I'm curious to see how he does this year under Allegri. He's going to be playing with – this is probably his best manager he'll ever play under, and can really help his game even more and further develop him. In regards to like players similar like him, I guess Domenico Barrardi is one that has been mentioned and rumored possibly of leaving Sassuolo. I know he's in his prime now. That's maybe someone who can go to Liverpool and make a difference, can provide goals, can score. I guess that's one name that comes to my mind. I don't know how many wingers are actually available right now on the market, but that I would say that's one in particular.
I think it's a really interesting point, actually, because we've also been rumoured with Dusan Vlahovic as well, obviously from Fiorentina, and we've done a couple of podcasts on him, we've done a couple of spaces on him, and every time I talk about him, I sell myself to him even more, because it's something that Liverpool haven't had, not as dynamic as that. Obviously, we had the target men of Benteke, and you could say Origi's a little bit of a target man as well, but every time we talk about Dusan Vlahovic, I'm like, oh, I want him more and more. And I think, you know, like you say, at Fiorentina, no offense to Viola at all, because, you know, at the end of the day, if a big club comes knocking and you are Vlahovic, you are going to want to leave. And it's just whether or not at 21 years old he wants to take that leap just yet. But he does excite me every time I talk about him, and Matty and Daz and I discuss him on the podcast.
I think the problem is that there's very few complete number 9s now in today's football game, and it's pretty scary. How many number 9s do you know that are really good and can score at an elite level? And I've heard this on many podcasts. Personally, I didn't even think about it until I've heard on previous podcasts. I've read it, where you don't have that number 9 who just plays that role and can just score goals on a consistent basis. And Dusan Vlahovic is probably one of the very few, along with Haaland, who's coming up and can score at a consistent rate and play their position purely. So there's very few in that regards, and it's kind of scary. Like, people regarded Teemo Werner as a number 9 before he joined Chelsea, and he's one of the biggest weights, I gotta say.
Yeah, bombed.
Yeah, I watched him today. I watched the preseason, maybe 5 minutes, and he missed a clear chance down the left side, and I don't think he'll ever be the same like he was in Germany. I think this is a guy who just needs to find his confidence again, but that's a side topic. But again, number 9s are very hard, and Vlahovic is one. If he joins Liverpool, I think that Klopp can do a lot of damage with him.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree. And like I say, every time we talk about him, I get more and more excited about him as well.
Moving on to our favourite adopted scouser, Lucas Leiva. I've never known a player be so bad then turn so good and so loved at Liverpool Football Club. And he sort of followed that on to Lazio, hasn't he? Like, he is adored by Lazio fans. Arguably one of the best central defensive midfielders in the league. Tell us about Lucas at Lazio, because I haven't seen much of him since he's left, and I'm intrigued because I do hear good things about him. Just what's he like for you?
He's been fantastic. One of the most underrated CDMs in football. His decision making, his tackling, his recovery rate. It's unbelievable how much space he can cover. I always say that he makes Sergei Malinkovic-Savic and Luis Alberto better at times because of the way he's able to be so effective in the back end and allow those two to play more further up the pitch and be more creative, more attack minded. I always say he's like the 5th defenseman in the back where he can contribute and help at any time. He makes those dangerous tackles in the box where you think you're gonna get a foul, but you don't. But then, like you were saying earlier, before the pod, where he makes those tackles outside the box, but he gets fouled. So he knows where to commit the foul where he needs to, but he'll never commit inside the box. And he's good at blocking too. Like, unbelievable decision making, when to make that clinical save, like that block shot where he makes a big difference in a game. Yeah, he doesn't score. I agree. Like, that's not his area of strength. But people forget how impactful he is with the intangibles of how he's a leader, how he can cover that inch of space so quick and make a difference in a game. So Lucas Leiva has been unbelievable. I would say now he's kind of dipped off in form because they have overused him the last 4 seasons he's been with us, 4 or 5. But when you're used every single game in all 3 competitions, it wears you down. So fans have mentioned it that they need a backup to Lucas Leiva because he's not at that level anymore where he could play 3 times a week when there's Europa League. It kind of affects him. Like last year, there was a handful of games maybe where he was really good. It was probably one of his most downfall years since joining Lazio, but he's done a remarkable job replacing Lucas Biglia. For the price that we were able to get him from Liverpool and the job that he's done, it's been great business by Lotito and Iglitare.
With Lucas, though, he's 34, 35 in January. So I do think Lazio probably do need to start looking at bringing someone in who can maybe learn from him to replace him, because he's getting to the twilight days of his career now. And how long's left on his deal?
1 year.
1 year.
Yeah.
Do you think he'd renew under Sarri? Do you think he could maybe turn into someone like Kante? Not saying he's anywhere near as good as Kante, but the Kante role that Sarri had Kante playing at Chelsea, like winning the ball back, distributing it. Is that something Lucas will play under Sarri, or do you think he might get drifted out in the Sarri system because of his age and his decline now?
That's a good question. I don't know. Maybe he can be as a Conte. He's already kind of quoted that it's a hard transition going to Sarri ball, but it's very demanding, he was saying. But that's going to happen at the age of 34, where you're in the back end of years, and it's never going to be as easy. So he could be. I see him playing more as like that holding midfielder, where, like you said, he's going to win those challenges, try to distribute the ball up front. And I think that Luis Alberto and Savage are going to play more higher up the pitch, because they're more clinical at scoring, more at making those passes to the final third. So Leiva is going to have a big part in under Sarri. That's 100%. How he uses him, I'm not even sure, to be honest.
We can't not talk about Liverpool and Lazio and not discuss another potential move from Liverpool to Lazio, and obviously the rumours of Xherdan Shaqiri departing Merseyside. I think that if the rumours are true, and if obviously Lazio are making moves, I think you are going to get hopefully one hell of a player, because while Shaqiri in the past 2 seasons hasn't hit the same heights as he did in the first season, there's definitely a player there. And seeing him in the European Championships for Switzerland, he looked like a player rejuvenated. He looked like a player who's got a point to prove. And going to Lazio and having that responsibility and that role as an experienced title winner, a 2-time Champions League winner, a 2-time FIFA Club World Cup winner, I think he'll flourish under Sarri, and I think he'll flourish under, in the Serie A as well. So I really do hope that is a move that happens, and not just obviously from our part, of raising funds and obviously, unregistering him for our 17 non-homegrown quota. But I really hope it works out for Shaqiri, because if anything, he's the luckiest charm you'll ever have as a footballer, because he's found success everywhere he goes almost, apart from Stoke. But even then, for them, he was brilliant for Stoke City as well. So, yeah, thoughts on Shaqiri?
Well, it's the ongoing issue of this liquidity ratio that I just learned last season, where it's just like a stumbling block for all the Serie A clubs, especially Lazio. Before even thinking if Shaqiri will come, the biggest question is the biggest thing that has to happen first is the sales. Lazio need to sell players in order to bring players in. They've already have Toma Basic, who's waiting to join Lazio. We have Felipe Anderson, who joined from West Ham, Luca Romero, but all these can't officially register with Lazio until they make some money and make some sales. And I don't know why it's so difficult with Lazio to kind of sell players off, where other teams are kind of having an easier time. And maybe it's Latito trying to demand too much for players, overvaluing them. I noticed that sometimes, but a guy like Shaqiri could make a difference. I do agree the last 2 seasons haven't been great, but I also consider when Ciro Immobile and Luis Alberto, we go back to when they joined Lazio, they weren't at their highest. And to get a guy like Shaqiri where you know that he has a lot of potential, and if his value is so low right now, it's worth taking advantage of. If you can get a player like that I think Liverpool mentioned that they'd be willing to lower the price in order to sell him. If I'm not wrong about that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they were saying that they will go lower than 10 million. I saw some reports 7 million, 8 million. But
that's a steal, mate. If you've got that, reports over here I think are around about 10 to 15 million.
10 to 15.
But I mean, if you can get Shaqiri for lower than 15, I personally think that's a snip if he stays fit.
I personally think they're going to lower the price because how poor his form is. Yeah,
we need to for our homegrown closer because we can't physically bring anyone in who's not English until we sell a foreign player. So I think Liverpool probably would maybe lower. If Lazio came in and said our final offer's 8 million, take it or leave it, I think Liverpool would probably say take it.
And I think Shaqiri also would probably say, listen, I'm not in your plans, especially with the emergence of Harvey Elliott, basic playing in every position that Shaqiri plays in. He's going to get more minutes this year. And it's money that Liverpool need. Shaqiri needs it. Shaqiri needs first team football. And I don't think it would be fair on Shaqiri to hang, to keep him just for the sake of £2 or £3 million extra.
That's a good point. And he plays the right side where he's primarily a right winger. No, that's his main position, but he's versatile. He can play as a left winger. He can play as an attacking midfielder. So this is a guy that he comes into the 4-3-3 under Sarri. He gives him some valuable options. I would see him playing as a left winger maybe, and Felipe Anderson playing on the right only because Raul Maro right now is only our left winger, and he's 17, I believe, or 17 years old, which he's still very young. So I could see him slotting in, and I don't know about what's going to happen with Joaquin Correa, and that's the other stumbling block is that they need to sell Correa, and if they can get that 35 million, it opens the door for a lot of players to come in after. So I think I like Shaqiri for the price. I think that this is a player who can turn his career around. Has mentioned he wants to play under Sarri, so it's very encouraging. I guess there's still another month, but as time progresses, Lazio fans become more worried of what's going to happen and who's going to go and who's going to come. So
there's a lot of parallels. Yeah, there's a lot of parallels between Liverpool and Lazio, isn't there, at the moment, what we're discussing. But yeah,
I thought that Liverpool has so much money like the other 5 clubs, or is that all an exaggeration where it's really just Chelsea and Man City who really have all the money compared to the rest of the English?
I mean, Liverpool have a lot of money. They're just a well-run business. So you'll see Chelsea and Manchester City, they take loans off their owners and they pay the owners back and stuff, where Liverpool only really spend what they earn. They're quite a well-run club, but the owners have never, ever put a penny in of their own money, which is quite annoying, I suppose. But I enjoy it more because with Chelsea and City, they could literally, you were seeing with Jack Grealish, they've decided they want him, they're going to go and pay whatever they want to get him. Same with Harry Kane. I feel as though that model, what Chelsea and City and even United to an extent operate, I feel like that's the real killer of football rather than what the Super League would have been. I feel like the football got ruined a long time ago by owners like that.
Okay. Yeah, well, I just wasn't sure.
Yeah, I mean, our owners are much more focused, like Matty said, on the business side. So if we have 100 million, that's not going to transfers. That's going to expanding the stadium, or that's going to like building a new training complex, something that can make Liverpool more valuable as a commodity that they can eventually go on to sell. So they are very much business based, as Matty quite rightly said, rather than an oligarchy's hobby. As you know, that is what it is. I think if you ask our fan base if they're split on the owners, 100% they will be split. Some love them, some hate them. So yeah, that's football. And you talk about Shaqiri's versatility. if he plays on the left, he once very famously whipped in a ball from the left-hand side onto Gino Wijnaldum's head against Barcelona, and probably, if not the best comeback, the second best comeback in football in history. So if he plays on the left, he can do a job as well.
No, and I think that there will also be a sell on. If Liverpool's going to sell him for $8 million, you better believe that there's going to be like a 15% sell on or something that they're going to want back on it. That's how they'll make their money back on this deal. That's probably another catch.
That's what they've done with Alberto, isn't it? I do think Lazio probably sell him for cheaper if he didn't have a 30% sell-on clause with him, because if you sell him for 60 million, 30% of that, Liverpool are getting 20 odd million of that money that you're selling for. So it's smart business if the player does progress. But I think Shaqiri would thrive under Sarri, to be honest with you. I think he would end up becoming one of the best players in Serie A. I think he needs a team like that where he starts every week. He's not the big fish, but he's one of the big fishes. Where at Liverpool, he went from Stoke being the big man to Liverpool probably being one of the lower options, and I think that hasn't helped him as well, because he's one in Switzerland. He's the big player, and he always performs. I think with Shaqiri, he needs to be relied on, because when he's relied on, he performs. Like Richie said, we've seen him in the game against Barcelona. He was relied on in that game and performed. Probably the best I've seen Shaqiri perform in a red shirt.
Well, that ball he put into Salah as well.
Yeah.
Right on his foot, bang in the back of the net. No, he's a fantastic player. Lazio would be, I think that's a place where he could go. The Italian league isn't as physical as the Premier League, but yeah, you'd be laughing for getting him for $8 million.
Well, we'll see what they have planned. I won't buy into any buying transfer market until I see a player get sold first. And then we can.
With outgoings, one player who gets linked to Liverpool pretty much every single summer is Serge Malinkovic-Savic. Do you think he could depart this summer? Not to Liverpool. I don't think that'd happen. But he's a player I think he's absolutely incredible. And it's strange that so many big clubs haven't went in for him before.
I don't see him going anywhere. Latito values his good players high, and I mean high. Like, he wants 100 million for him, and wow. I think the lowest he's gone is 80 million, and I don't blame him. And when you're buying a guy like Jack Grealish for 100 million, I'm going to demand Savage 100 million too. And the fact is that Latito doesn't want to be bossed around by these bigger clubs, where he knows they have the money to buy his player. And well, he's not going to bow down and say, just because my team only makes a quarter of what you make, I'm going to accept what you're offering me. No. And if anything, before he sells Savage, I think the first player that will be gone is Luis Alberto, because Savage is still younger. I believe he's 26 years old. He's viewed as a possible choice to be captain of Lazio. He's talked about how he wants to hold a bigger leadership role with the club. I've had people reach out to me telling me that one person reached out, actually said that he lives down the street from Savage, and was mentioning to me that he loves the city of Rome. He embraces it, doesn't want to move anywhere else. The only other place I can ever see him leaving is Real Madrid, because he's publicly said on a show that it's like his dream team to play for, and I think he likes the atmosphere, the city, because the hot weather, it's similar to Rome, I would assume. So yeah. Savage has never complained about leaving. He's always been a true role model to this team, a leader, unless something comes along, but he's very mature for his age, I have to say, like very mature compared to other players on the team. So I don't see Savage leaving anytime soon. That's one player. I see, like I said, I see Alberto being sold well before he does.
Awesome. There we go. Well, that is it for another edition of The Room. And thank you all for joining us. Special thanks, obviously, as well to you, Jerry, who's knowledge about Italian football is insightful. And, hopefully, like I say, Xherdan Shaqiri will find his feet if obviously things work out for you at Lazio and offloading players. But yeah, thank you so much for that. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you've found our company as endearing as we found yours.
No, it was very fun, very interesting, and thank you for the insight as well for Liverpool and Lucas Leiva and everything. It was great joining you guys, so thank you.
That's all right. Thank you very much. So from Daz, Matty, and I, as always, we will be around most Saturdays on a Spaces, but we will be releasing a podcast every Tuesday on Spotify, Apple, Google, and Android. All right. But from all of us now, thank you for listening. And as always, up the Reds.
The Reds.